You're listening to Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick in association with Wexford Insurances. Challenge us at Wexford Insurances 0818 31 30 30.
Good morning, I'm Karl Fitzpatrick and it's business time here on Southeast Radio. Welcome to this week's edition of Business Matters and I'm delighted to have your company. You can follow me on Twitter at Karl Fitzpatrick or visit karlfitzpatrick.ie. Let's get straight down to business. On this week's agenda, I'll be speaking to recruiter Gemma Hayes about the current job market here in County Wexford and asking her to share her top tips with both employers and job seekers. And Kevin Breen of the Southeast Learning Centre drops by to discuss how the standard of maths education in Ireland is having a negative effect on business. If there's any particular topic you would like to hear covered on the show, feel free to email the details to businessmatters@southeastradio.ie. Joining me now in studio is Gemma Hayes of Gemma Hayes Recruitment based in Wexford Town. Gemma, have you always been involved in the recruitment sector?
Okay, Carl, well, my career started back in 1997 when I joined Equifax Credit Reference Agency. At the time, they were setting up a new telemarketing, telesales department, so I joined as a telesales operative. Worked there for about a year and then the department was due to close, so I got promoted to the UK and England to train on the commercial side of the business. So moved to the UK where I worked with them in Birmingham for another year, and then I got into recruitment in 1999 in IT recruitment and finance, and then joined Adecco Recruitment in the year 2000, where I joined the Wolverhampton offices as a permanent recruiter, working on generalist and specialist recruitment vacancies across the West Midlands. Then moved to the Cambridge branch, where I spent another year and a half with them as a recruitment consultant across multiple sectors and industries. And then in 2003, I got a promotion back home to Ireland, where I set up the Southeast divisions for Adecco in Ireland. Ran that until 2005, and 54 branches were actually closed in 2005, and I was one of them. So in 2006, I decided to set up my own agency, Gemma Hayes Recruitment, which is thankfully still in operation.
So you found yourself in a situation where you were made redundant yourself back in 2005. How much of an impact did that have on you at the time?
It had a massive impact on me, and not just me. I had a team of people working with me, and I was actually quite heavily pregnant at the time. So I had to try and just, take a step back and take stock of things. And I suppose I took a couple of months out, had my child, and then in 2006 I just had to, dust myself off. I had worked within the recruitment industry. Obviously I was going to be able to help myself and, be in a position that I could have kind of taken my clients with me. So luckily I had the loyalty of them and they came with me when I set up on my own in 2006.
So in 2006 you set up Gemma Hayes Recruitment. That was part of the good times, back in the boom itself. Tell me about how buoyant the market was back then.
Well, Carl, in 2006, I'm sure everyone listening will know they were the boom times, as we call them. And my day was jam-packed from like 7:30 in the morning. I had so many vacancies I didn't know what to do with. I struggled to try and actually find candidates for them at that time. I had numerous vacancies across every sector, every role discipline, every industry discipline, from low-level junior positions right the way through to the senior directorship level positions across generalist and specialist sectors. So it was so busy, and I had, with this in mind, I suppose it was almost unheard of in recruitment that you would ever even make a profit in your first year, but my first year brought in great profit for me, and I had a wonderful 2 years on my own in the first kind of stages of a business.
In relation to the onslaught of the recession, when did you first see that coming? Because they do say that the recruitment sector is the first one to identify any type of a recession on its way.
Well, Carl, for me, probably I started to have alarm bells ringing coming to the back end of 2007. And then I really noticed a massive, massive impact in 2008. Probably around about July 2008. Is when, for me, things started to go horribly wrong. So
what did you do yourself within the confines of your own business to adapt it to the new market condition that was out there?
Okay, well, I suppose I just had to sit down and take an aerial view of the business, Carl, and take stock of everything that was going on. And, with that came, in the good times, I had offices that needed to be kind of readdressed. So the offices went, and, advertising budgets that I had in place and had the money to spend initially in my first 2 years had to go. So I really just had to adjust my business and streamline the processes and try and survive on the minimal kind of tools that I needed to try and get by.
So it was all about minimising your cost base at that stage. From an employer's perspective, over the last number of years, have you seen their expectations increase by much?
In relation to hiring, well, it hasn't really happened in the last couple of years. Everyone went very quiet and they made do with what they had already in existing staff. But in relation to new hires and when an actual company is starting to go and look for somebody now, which is happening at the moment, thank God, their expectations are increased, that they're looking for more qualifications. People need to be ticking 100% of the boxes now, more so than they would have ever done before. When people are successful, their targets are being increased. They're looking for a lot more productivity from their staff, and for people to, I suppose, be an awful lot more flexible in their approach in relation to taking on additional duties as required as the business needs. Are
you finding that employers are a little bit cautious about employing new staff out there today?
They are, and not as much as they were in 2011 and 2010, Karl, but they're extremely cautious because there's so much news hitting us all every single day, and when there's an announcement of redundancies or whatever else, people's purse strings start to firmly close again. So when they do go and take somebody on, it has to be for an absolute necessity, not just kind of as it would have been before where they had an idea and then they went and they did it. So they are being very cautious in relation to hiring.
Do you think that the government have done enough in terms of introducing new initiatives to be able to deal with the unemployment level that's out there today?
I think the government are tasked with an absolutely monster of a task to try and, overcome this current crisis. There is a couple of initiatives that I would have thought were, quite good in the sense of the internship programme that I know companies around Wexford are actually using at the moment. And whilst there was a lot of scepticism around the internships initially, I do think this has, people are warming to the idea. I know, in particular, there's a couple of clients of mine that would be advocates of the internship programme, and people need to, I think, look at the longer term picture of it. I know it's just an additional €50 to your social welfare payment, but it's a means to get into a company, prove yourself over a 9-month period, and work your socks off and make yourself indispensable to that company so they will, keep you in there and get yourself a full-time position as a result.
Over the last number of years, you must have seen that lots of employers have used a direct channel to go out and employ people themselves. So they've bypassed recruitment agencies, and the effects of that on the recruitment sector must have been enormous.
It was absolutely huge, and I'm here to tell the tale about that, Karl. And I understand, and it makes business sense for people to kind of keep their costs and everything down. So, in essence, what had happened was us agencies were bypassed. So they would go and advertise in the local press, advertise, with the likes of Irish Jobs and Recruit Ireland directly onto other kind of websites. So they would actually have the candidate flow come to them directly. However, the last 12 months have seen, a shift back towards the interest in recruitment agencies, in the sense that it's usually a HR manager, as you know, on site and in a company that will be receiving all these applications through. And as you can imagine, the numbers of these CVs being received for vacancies is in the hundreds. So this in kind of incorporated with what they do on a day-to-day basis in relation to kind of employee relation issues, industrial relation issues. Most of them are doing payroll now, as so much more has been put on these people's heads because people have been, impacted by redundancies. There's going to be very few people across County Wexford that haven't been hit with a redundancy situation, Karl.
In relation to employers, what advice would you give to employers that are interested in recruiting new staff today?
I think, they just need to be very clear and concise in their approach and in what they're looking for. Get together a good job description, knowing exactly what they want and what they require from the person.
Gemma, how important is LinkedIn in the recruitment process today?
Karl, I think LinkedIn is an extremely important tool for everybody to be using, and I would recommend that every job seeker out there, every professional that is seeking employment needs to create a LinkedIn page. I think, I am an advocate of LinkedIn, and I actually have a specific example of how well it actually works, because I have recently filled a vacancy and I did it through LinkedIn, and it was a niche vacancy for a training position that I needed to fill for a client in Wexford. And I was struggling with the uptake of applications for it, and I went on to LinkedIn, and there is a tool on there that allows you to search, and I keyed in a couple of particular words and managed to come up with over 10 pages of specific candidates that were matching the skills and requirements that I required. And off that, I made contact with a gentleman by the name of Josh Blake, who was the head of SkillsNet in Dublin. And he was the head of the IITD Training and Development membership organisation. And he actually contacted me and said he would put my vacancy up on the site for all of the members to see, and I filled the vacancy on the back of what he had done. So it really works, and people help each other and support each other through it, and everyone is using recommendations from it, and it has been looked at a lot by prospective employers.
We're going to take a quick commercial break now. Gemma is going to stay with us, and after the break we'll be discussing the high performing sectors across County Wexford. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. Recruiter Gemma Hayes is here with me in studio. Before the break, you provided advice to employers on the recruitment process. I'd like to focus on job seekers next. From your experience, are job seekers willing to develop their skill sets for other sectors?
Look, I've been honest with you, actually people just don't really have a choice, so it comes down at the bottom line that they actually have to go about reskilling and retraining, upskilling, coming from industries such as construction, from manufacturing, from catering, etc. The vacancies just simply aren't there anymore. The vacancies, they need to be training in the areas of childcare, healthcare, renewable energy, IT, food, the high-tech sector. So what people are having to do, and I'm noticing it more and more, is go on to training courses, go on to the relevant courses that they need to get themselves into these industries and to be able to get their foot onto the rung of the ladder, to get into, to prove themselves and start their career within these sectors.
While we're on the topic of employees, the 2-page rule in relation to a CV, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm glad you asked me that question, actually, Karl, because I've been hit by this question so many times, and so many of the CVs that I'm after receiving over the past kind of 12 to 18 months, a lot of them were the 2-page rule of thumb that they had thought was actually the case. And I'm here today to tell people that a CV does not need to be 2 pages. Your CV needs to be the length that it needs to be. So all I can give is an example. If somebody's been working for 15, 20 years, they are not going to be able to fit all of their education, their skills, their work history into a 2-page document. If your CV needs to be 3 pages or 4 pages, so be it. And in that way, the job seeker can ensure they're not going to be able to leave anything out, for the reader to be able to see.
Gemma, there's not a family across County Wexford that hasn't been affected in some way by redundancy or unemployment across the county over the last number of years. What advice would you give to somebody that's looking to put together a CV today that may never have had to do it in the past?
That's a good question, Karl. I'm glad you asked me it. I think it's an extremely daunting task. If you were to ask me to create a CV, I'd be exactly the same. People don't like actually talking about themselves. But basically how I would structure a CV is that your CV needs to start with obviously your personal details, your name and your address and etc. And then I would advise that the person go on to do a personal profile section, which would be a couple of lines, and I call it as an attention grabber about yourself. For example, I'm an accountant with 25 years experience, and a little bit about kind of your ethic and approach to work. Then to go on to your education, working most recent backwards and listing your achievements and your education qualifications, and then on to employment history, starting most recent working backwards, listing your dates, the company name, job title and key responsibilities, and listing those in bulleted format, and also listing the achievements with each and every role. And then on to your hobbies. So I suggest something creative, something intellectual and something social, and then on to references.
The next step then is in relation to searching for a particular job. How should somebody set about that task?
Okay, well, it's almost like at the moment, Karl, a job in itself, looking for a job. So I think the key is to be extremely proactive. And what I would be advising job seekers to do is actually to spend, set out a couple of hours in their day to go online and search the internet, all the different various sites are. So some of the examples would be irishjobs.ie, recruitireland.com, Jobrapido, I find quite good, careerjet.ie, simplyhire.ie, and then again, obviously the newspapers and the recruitment agencies across the country. I would say, don't have any loyalties to anyone you're working with. You need to get your CV out there, and if you've got to send it to, every means possible over the internet to agencies, into companies directly, that's the route that people are going to have to take.
Following that, let's say they're successful enough in getting to an interview stage. What advice would you give to people to prepare for an interview?
Okay, well, what I was saying, Karl, is, in relation, if someone has been successful and called for a first round interview stage, they need to make sure that they are actually fully aware and know the job description inside out, upside down that they're going for. They need to research the company in-depthly, and, by research I mean going online and checking out the company, checking out their site. But what I would also be advising to do is actually ask people who work in the company. If they know anybody who works in there, ask your friends, do they know anybody who works in there? Because getting the inside track is going to be really, really crucial. I would also say, it's a given that you're well turned out on the day. Ideally, I would say almost always a suit to an interview. Try and do a dummy run beforehand. It's what I call a dummy run, is actually taking a trip, see how long it takes, arriving there on time so you've got yourself composed, and actually making sure that you take the time, you're actually keeping open body language in the meeting, you're answering the questions clearly and concisely, and you're asking questions that you need to ask. And the thing that I would always say to people is, and people tend not to do it, at the end of your meeting, I would actually say to people to tell them that you're interested in the job and you'd really like to work for them, and ask them what are the next steps, and that I would really like to work here. What do I need to do next? What's the next steps, please?
So, Gemma, how is the job market across County Wexford today?
Karl, I think there's definitely a brighter light shining at the end of that tunnel that didn't seem to be there kind of 18, 24 months ago. There is some good news stories for the Wexford region. In particular, over the last 12 months, we've heard a few announcements. Of those announcements, we heard that Danone is undergoing a site expansion programme. Companies such as Irish Country Meats are doing well, so the food industry is doing really well. As I know you had Anne O'Brien on your show from Kent Group a few months ago. They won the Exporter of the Year award last year. Coca-Cola had their announcement of arriving to Wexford. Clearstream Technologies are in there. And I think, there's positive signs out there, Karl. The purse strings are loosening slightly. There's more of an uptake on recruitment and on new positions. And in particular, I think the industries for me that will be thriving are the likes of the food sector, the high-tech industries, the IT, social media, R&D and innovation, pharmaceutical, medical devices and science, and export. So there is definitely stuff happening. And Wexford has, it's had its good fair share of good news stories in the last 12 months.
What about focusing on the next 12 months? What's happening there? Where are the green shoots?
Well, I think, there is going to be green shoots. I think your listeners would have heard the news on Thursday that the big announcement there from the Taoiseach down in Waterford. The likes of the pharmaceuticals I see is still growing. I think the food industry is an industry definitely to watch. I think there's going to be a lot of stuff happening there. Manufacturing is starting to revive again. I think there's an uptake across all sectors. Whilst every sector was affected initially, some of them more so than others, but I can definitely see from today's market that the vacancies are starting to happen again. There's going to be TK Maxx arriving here in the summer months, along with Meadows and Byrne. There's a new home store coming. As kind of H-Tech has come to Wexford as well, which has brought 250 jobs, and they probably we hope will grow. So we're hoping for growth, and I'm positive there's going to be growth coming over the next 12 to 18 months, and we'll just keep the fingers crossed and hope for the best.
Well, Gemma, many thanks for coming in and providing us with an insight into the local job market, and for sharing your tips for both employers and job seekers. If you've just tuned in, you are welcome along to this week's edition of Business Matters with me, Karl Fitzpatrick. You can contact the show by emailing businessmatters@southeastradio.ie. Coming up after the news, I'll be speaking to Kevin Breen of the South East Learning Centre about how the standard of maths education in Ireland is having a negative effect on business. So stay tuned.
You're listening to South East Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick in association with Wexford Insurances. Think Wexford Insurances for your business insurance.